This is Open Line.
Welcome into Open Line, everyone. Rhori Johnston with you on this Thursday night. We hope you're staying safe and warm. Maybe got out and enjoyed the beautiful winter weather. I know the roads have been treacherous the last few days, but things are clearing up and looking good. We've made it through most of the week, so congratulations. But most of you are inside tonight, as I would imagine, and staying warm, having some dinner, and hopefully watching Open Line. And we hope to take your calls here because we're talking about an important topic tonight, and that is, do Tennessee schools get enough money? Do we have an education funding crisis in Tennessee? And we want to welcome Beth Brown, regular guest here, the president of the Tennessee Education Association, and Andy Spears with the Tennessee Education Report. Thank you both for being here.
Thanks, Rhori.
All right, so we know there's been a lot of criticism after the governor's State of the State address. And this, Beth, I know you said that Governor Lee's proposed increases for public education is just not enough to meet current needs and falls short of what was possible because we have record state revenue surpluses and collections. Were you expecting the governor's plan to be what it was at the level that it was?
Well, I'm always hopeful that the governor and the General Assembly will do better by Tennessee's students. I won't say that I was shocked, but definitely disappointed when we know that there is significant cash reserves that could be used and significant recurring revenue that could be used to bolster our public schools. We know that we have significant needs that are not being met, and the governor, quite frankly, missed a real opportunity to show his commitment to our public schools and to live his promise to make Tennessee the best place in which to live, teach, and learn.
Andy, what are you hearing on Capitol Hill and the reaction to this?
Yeah, I mean, I think the general reaction is disappointing. I mean, Beth pointed out a couple of weeks ago, maybe last week, the new revenue numbers. We have $380 million in surplus in January alone. There are many years we don't have $380 million extra in the whole year, and that was just in 1 month. So we're on track for a $2 billion surplus. We have a governor who's promised to invest in schools. Last year, he promised to raise to teachers and then canceled it. It turns out we could pay for it. So I think there's a lot of disappointment both in classrooms. We have a very challenging year for teachers, as I know Beth can attest, with COVID. And we have a tremendous opportunity to invest, and we have a governor who just doesn't seem willing to take the step to invest in schools.
You said it's been a challenging year for teachers. I have read some critics who have said it may have been challenging in the beginning for teachers to get creative, but once they got on a roll, it's actually been easier for them because they've been staying home. Do you agree?
You can take that one first.
Yeah. Beth's ready to roll on that one. Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, no, absolutely not. So I know a lot of teachers. I actually happen to live with one, and it's certainly not easier.
Yeah.
If anything, teachers are working more. They're teaching. Sometimes in hybrid classes, they're teaching the same class on Monday, then teaching it on Tuesday.
Right.
They have students who come in for a short period of time, full time, and then don't. They're teaching in a Google Classroom and in person. They're dealing with students online and in the in-person environment. So ramping up to virtual has not been easier. Dealing with all the realities of COVID in a school building has not been easier. Unfortunately, the state saw fit to maintain the requirement that we have testing this year. That will not be easier. If anything, and I think Beth can speak to this because they did a survey about it, but teachers are working more and harder and doing a lot more to accommodate kids. Teachers are now helping kids make sure they have food. I think we saw at the end of the year in Metro last year, and we're now seeing in districts around the state, teachers and school bus drivers are making sure that kids get food deliveries in places when school's not in session. So they're doing more work, not less.
Earlier tonight on the CBS Evening News, there was a story of two teachers, and I'm sorry, but I forget where they were, but they were in I think an inner city and economically deprived area, and they literally were going door to door visiting their students at a distance, obviously checking in on them, especially students who they've noticed had been missing classes via virtual classes, who just not been there. And it turns out a lot of them were having difficulties with internet, were having difficulties with just having computers with them, laptops, moving some of them from dad's house to mom's house to grandparents' house. So a lot of extra effort for some of these teachers, no doubt.
Absolutely, and Andy's right. The TEA did a survey of educators in the fall, and what we discovered was that on average, Tennessee's educators worked an additional 235 hours in the fall semester, so about 5 extra weeks of work. And when you think about educating via technology or educating remotely or virtually, there's a lot that goes into that. First and foremost, I will tell you, as a high school English teacher, there is nothing about the way that I operate my classroom and provide instruction in person that can be replicated online. So you're talking about redesigning your entire curriculum,
right,
which is extremely challenging. And then we cannot understate the disruption that has been caused by the technology challenges and some of those other challenges that you were just talking about, with the insecurity around food and housing, and the fact that educators have spent a lot of time and effort just trying to find their students, to reach their students. So I don't know who thinks it's been easier teaching remotely, but bless their hearts, it hasn't.
Yeah. Okay, so I'll ask both of you this question, and a reminder to our viewers, our phone lines are open. 737+ is the phone number. We'd love to hear from you, parents, maybe some educators out there as well, as we discuss this important issue. Governor Lee doesn't hide the fact that he is a fiscal conservative, and you mentioned the big surplus numbers, but you have to understand also that education is just one piece of the pie as far as the state goes, and he has to look at the long-term budget for the state and the economic health, financial health of the state. Do you give him any slack for that?
No.
Okay.
No.
All right.
No. I did an analysis not long ago about the last 10 years. So the last two, last governor and this governor. And the reality is we've invested far less than we've been able to. So we've had, since the Great Recession, Tennessee has recovered fairly well. And so we have about $5 billion in reserves. As Beth alluded to, various reserves in different accounts, at least $3 billion between the last 2 fiscal years alone in extra money. So you can be a fiscal conservative. You can spend money on public schools in a large way and not raise a single person's taxes. And in fact, county commissioners and the County Commissioners Association has opposed Governor Lee on vouchers and talked about this, but county commissioners would love it if the state would invest $1 to $2 billion in schools, because it would mean they could keep property taxes low.
Sure.
So conservatives would like the low tax approach of taking this surplus and putting a lot of it into schools. No one's saying we should put all $3 billion into schools. That would be great. But $1 to $2 billion of investment, we have the money. We can do it without raising taxes. There's no reason why not to.
Yeah, and Rhori, this is what we have to think about when we're talking about not taking all of this cash and investing some of it into our schools and into our students. You can tout being a fiscal conservative, but if all you're doing is building up your bank account and you're starving your schools or you're starving your kids, that is nothing to brag about. And quite frankly, it's embarrassing when you look at the Southeast and you consider where we compare to our surrounding states in terms of education funding, when it would take $2 billion just to get to the same education funding level as Kentucky, $560 million to get to the education level of Alabama. All I can say is thank God for Mississippi, because they're the only ones making us look decent.
I think we're 46th with the ranking, but do you think these rankings are even fair? Isn't it comparing apples and oranges? Why should we worry about what they're doing in Kentucky or Arkansas? Let's focus on a plan here in Tennessee.
Well, go ahead.
Well, so I think there's a really interesting group called the Education Law Center out of New Jersey, and they do this analysis about both funding and funding effort. And so the interesting thing, to your point, Rhori, is Tennessee also gets an F in funding effort. So what we spend on schools relative to our ability to pay. The other part of that is Kentucky gets a good payoff for that investment. So if you look at, for example, students on free and reduced lunch. Students on free and reduced lunch in Kentucky score 16 points higher on the NAEP in science than the same students in Tennessee. So they're getting bang for their buck that we're just not getting. As Beth points out, we're starving our students.
Right.
And the results show.
Yeah, you see the results. All right, hold on, Beth. I've got a big question for you after this break, but we do have to take a quick break. And please call in 737+ on Open Line tonight. We're waiting to hear from you folks. We'll be right back.